Good evening and welcome to Motor Mouth, brought to you by the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles. I'm Kendra.
I'm Dan.
And we're sitting in a 1954 Fagel, and we'll get to this truck a little later.
Yes.
He's one of our special guests this month on Motor Mouth. But before we get to the show, just want to remind you of some upcoming events here at the museum. On Saturday, June 20th, we will be having our first ever food truck fair here at the museum in the parking lot. The truck stops here, Mobile Madness, will feature 9 different food trucks, all different types of food, including 2 of which that are still operating out of Boyertown Auto Body Works trucks. A 1961 Civil Defense Mobile Canteen, which is coming all the way from Maine, believe it or not. And they're going to be serving fresh lobster, which I'm happy about. That's where you'll find me on June 20th. And also a, I believe, 1977 Mr. Softy truck will be here as well.
Fresh ice cream.
Fresh ice cream. Not all the way from Maine this time.
No.
So it's going to be a really neat event. We're going to have entertainment all day. Magician, face painting, DJ, clowns. So come on out. It's a great family-friendly event. It's $5 admission to the fair, but it also includes admission here to the museum as well. Children under 5 are free. And we're going to have also an exhibit in the lobby on food trucks that were built here at the Boyertown Auto Body Works. So we're really looking forward to it. And we also want to thank all of our sponsors for this event. Passmore Service Center, Everything Printing, Eagle Pool and Spa, Gateway Ticketing Systems, Pat Veterinary Hospital, Morphe Auctions, Adams Royal Car Wash, Chestnut Knoll, and Salon Satori. So thank you to all of our sponsors for helping out. And other than that, the next big thing to really look for, I guess, is our next Hoods Up weekend, which is in July. And that's July 18th and 19th. And we did this in March. Maybe you visited us back then. It was a really successful event. Basically, during regular museum hours that weekend, we're going to have the hoods of most of the cars and trucks here open, so you can take a look at the engines. And we've got some really unique engines here. Yeah, experimental stuff, maybe even amongst, like the Duriers, for example. We might have 5 Duriers, but all their engines are different.
Right.
So
what's interesting is you said the last one was in March, and there were some questions that came up from visitors to museum staff and volunteers about some of the engines. So we've kind of researched some of this, so we feel a little more educated. So, some really interesting engines out there once you start getting into them. Definitely.
We get some neat stuff here. So we hope to see you for that. But otherwise, our regular business hours are Tuesday through Sundays, 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we're closed most major holidays. And I know coming up July 4th, we'll be closed that day. But we will be open the 3rd and the 5th, but we are closed on the 4th. And it's going to be an exciting summer here at the museum, I think. So tonight we got a really neat show. And
aren't they all?
Well, of course, we always have a neat
This is
shows,
equally neat.
Equally neat. So I think we're going to climb out of this truck and start the program.
Okay. See you later. Okay, we have a Model T here. And the historic reason for this Model T being in this museum is this box that we're looking at is the first Boyertown body that would be on a motorized vehicle. Now, I understand this motorized vehicle, this Model T, was not the original one, but the box is. And a little bit about the history of this box, it was made for a local cigar company. And then,
cigars.
Okay, local meaning 2 blocks from here, I believe.
Yeah.
And
in fact, I think if you're familiar with Boyertown, that the big intersection there, 562 and 73, is the Herb. It's the ERB something building, and that was there.
Okay. Yeah. And then somewhere along the line went to this printer company in Ole, and then it's here. But it's all original, and it's just #1 motorized body, I guess. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is back in the early days of automobiles and trucks, or excuse me, back in the early days of automobiles, that was like pre-truck, and cars were just pretty much used, but somebody got the idea we want to haul some things in it, such as chickens or cows or hay or cigars, yeah. And so they'd either throw it in the back seat of the car, which wasn't really nice on Sunday when you had to sit on it, sit in it, or they manufactured their own. Now this car here had a little deck back here with a little trunk type thing, and you just remove it and you could put this in. We also have another item in storage that you could put on here, same shape, right in here, that you could put on top and advertise a product, and it's pretty neat. Anyway, aftermarket companies got it into their minds here, and there was all sorts of aftermarket companies that would build bodies, truck bodies, and pretty much you would just remove the back end of the original and put this on. And I'll rattle through some of these real quick. And we had a company called A.J. Mundy Company, and they had a van-type body that you could attach to a Model T chassis. London Auto Supply Company, they manufactured commercial bodies for Ford chassis, included every conceivable type of body. That'd be full panel type, screen side bodies, jitney buses, other special bodies. Sears and Roebuck, you could go to, well, you didn't have a Sears store yet. I don't think the stores were invented. But you could order through Sears kits to convert your Model T automobile into a truck. You could have a pickup bed from Sears. It cost you $15.95. Plain gloss black, complete with rear lamp bracket and mounting bolts.
Ooh.
Yeah, okay.
How thoughtful.
Yeah, how thoughtful. And then we mentioned Boardtown body here, and this is, what year is this car again, this vehicle?
We say 14.
Okay, 14 sounds good.
A Model T expert would probably take issue with that.
But that's the era we're talking about, is the middle teens there.
The box is 14.
Yeah, and some of the ones I just mentioned were the same time. There's one from 1915 and so on and so forth. So the Sears and Roebuck actually mentioned that was from the 20s. Well, we needed heavier duty bodies, and everything was just light duty here. So these companies got this idea, and the PBB assembly was made by a Grebe company out of Boston, Massachusetts. And what you would do, you would take your Ford automobile, you would lengthen the chassis to 124, 130, or 136 inch wheelbase, and put new frame rails on it. And the way this would work, you would still keep the rear axle here, but instead of a wheel, you would have like a sprocket here, and you would have a new axle back further here, and it would be chain driven. So instead of, I believe it's 100, maybe 100 inches wheelbase, we now extended about 20 more inches or whatever it would be. That's how these ran. Another one was, you'll see a picture of that on your TV there. Another one was Dearborn Universal out of Chicago. 1917, this cost you $350, and it turned a regular car into a 1-ton truck. Said you can profitably solve the used car problem in your locality. Convert these cars into trucks. So, you know, I guess there was used car problems, but you take a used car, you can make almost a brand new truck out of it. Now, the most famous was Smith Forma truck. In fact, I just saw one for sale recently. Same idea. You would take the chassis and extend, you would clamp their new lengthened chassis onto your old one, put a secondary axle back here, and use this old axle as the power through chains for it. And it started out with Ford, but they developed into other types of cars. I'll read this. It says, choose your own power plant. From an attachment to be used with Ford cars alone, Smith Forma truck has been developed until now. It is really installed on Maxwell, Dodge Brothers, Buick, Chevrolet, or Overland cars. choose your own power plant, convert it into a fully guaranteed permanent permanent 1-ton truck in a few hours. So they were selling thousands, tens of thousands of these Smith Forma trucks. So that's pretty unique also. Now, it kind of closed their article there. It said, Smith Forma truck, they warned potential customers to beware of numerous imitations. So there was a problem with people imitating them. I guess Smith Forma truck had a patent on it, and there was other guys kind of sneaking, trying to get part of the market there. So it told you beware of them. So that's kind of what we did here. We looked at this, and back 100 years ago or 110 years ago, we just had cars. We didn't really have trucks like we think of them today. And from here, we're going to go on, and we're going to look at some early truck trailers that you would attach to the back of like a Smith Forma truck. You would have the attachment back here for like a fifth wheel type trailer. Okay, I was just talking about Fords and Fords being converted into trucks. Well, the next step there was to have trailers and increase the payload of those Fords. With us tonight, we have Ruth Fruhoff, whose grandfather founded the Fruhoff Trailer Company. Was that the proper name of it, Fruhoff Trailer Company, or was there something else?
Yes, that was correct.
Okay, and she's going to tell us all about the history and all the interesting things about Fruhoff trailers.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is my book that I wrote to celebrate the centennial of the invention of the semi-trailer. And my grandfather, August Fruhoff, and his business partner, Otto Newman, were German blacksmiths in Detroit. And they had a customer. They were worried, actually, about the motor age because they were going to lose their buggy business. They saw the motor age as something that was not positive. So one day, one of their customers, Frederick Sibley, a lumber merchant, came into the blacksmith shop, and he had a new Model T, which of course was bad news from their point of view, but he wanted them to attach a wagon with their sailboat to his Model T. So they worked it out. It took them 2 or 3 days to figure it out. And of course, they were good old-fashioned German, fix-it guys. It didn't exist, they built it. And they removed the back seat of the Model T to accommodate the beginning of the trailer, the wagon trailer. And my grandfather called it a semi-trailer because it only had 1 axle and 2 wheels.
Okay, so that's where that name came from.
Yeah.
How about that?
Isn't that cool?
I've always seen semi-trailers, heard that term. I never really thought about it, but
Me neither.
it was the beginning of it. It was the beginning.
Really, me neither until I started doing this project. And Henry Ford got so mad that he canceled the warranty on the modified Model T.
Okay.
Sounds like typical Henry Ford.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And now, this was your grandfather, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And this is my uncle at the helm of the Model T as he's demonstrating it to Mr. Sibley. So Mr. Sibley was so impressed with the converted wagon for his sailboat, which successfully got the sailboat to his lake house in a couple hours versus a couple days by horse and buggy. Right. So he came back to my granddad and had his entire lumber fleet converted over to semi-trailers, and bingo, the semi-trailer industry was born. And then, of course, competitors to Frederick Sibley in the lumber industry in Detroit saw the advantage that he had with having something that was motorized for commercial use. And you probably know this, that automobiles were never thought of for commercial use. They were really for pleasure, going out for a Sunday drive.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, all of a sudden they had complete sea change in their thinking to start thinking about a Model T as a commercial vehicle. And of course, semi-tractor trucks didn't exist then, and then they started building those to go along with the semi-trailers.
Now, I look at that picture here, and it's more than just a converted car with the trailer on it. I'm sure there was some sort of mechanism to connect them together so things didn't fall apart or fall over or whatever. And that's, you were briefly mentioning that there was
Yes.
some interesting things.
That's quite true. They extended the back of the Model T slightly, and then these are the wheels, of course, for the back of the Model T. And they created a very primitive kingpin hitch, which, of course, was not very effective on the lousy roads of 1914,
Right.
and also going over hills. So we think about 1916, they adopted the Martin Rocking fifth wheel hitch, which was a company in Massachusetts that made a very good fifth wheel. It was known as a rocking fifth wheel because it was very good going over hills. And they used that hitch for a couple years until 1918 when they manufactured their own manual semi-trailer fifth wheel. And then in 1926, they created the automatic fifth wheel. And according to other truck historians that I've spoken to, they say that that invention was probably you'd think it would be the semi-trailer invention, but they said that it was the automatic fifth wheel that was the most important invention that Fruhoff gave to the trucking industry.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Where does that term fifth wheel come from? We already learned about the semi-trailer, now we're going to learn about the fifth wheel.
My grandfather called it a fifth wheel because if you look at the Martin Rocking, it's actually a wheel device.
Okay.
And it's on like a little pin that rocks.
Okay.
So when you look at it, it's sort of developed a colloquial name of a fifth wheel. And I don't have a photo of the Martin Rocking in here. I have a photo in here. So the Martin was actually a complete circle.
Okay.
It wasn't until Fruhoff invented this sort of jaw mechanism, which became the automatic fifth wheel. But if you look on Google Martin Rocking fifth wheel, and it's actually a circle. It looks almost like a steering wheel or a wagon wheel. So they sort of refer to it as a fifth wheel.
And is this the Martin you were referring to earlier in not so glowing terms, correct?
Yes, we uncovered all sorts of information about Charles Martin, and he was definitely a bit of a scoundrel. And that is putting it mildly. He was in trouble for all sorts of patent infringement, and he takes credit for Herman Farr's invention. It was Herman Farr's invention, and then they teamed up. I think Martin was probably a really great spokesman and probably a good businessman, and he saw that Herman Farr's invention could really become a gold mine. So to his credit, he turned it into a gold mine.
Okay.
But in unscrupulous methods.
All right.
And if I'm correct too, when we were talking earlier, this is not the only patent Fruhoff held. They've invented quite a lot of
That's quite
things,
true.
that really helped with the trucking industry.
That's quite true. They were really old-fashioned German, creators, really. And they also saw right away, in order to have an edge on their competition, their first employee was an engineer. So they realized that they needed good engineering, and they never ever skimped on engineers. And in fact, their slogan was engineered transportation. And their first engineer, a guy named Hartwick, was the patent holder under Fruhoff for the automatic fifth wheel. And but all of this brochure is all loaded with Fruhoff patents. Anti-lock brakes were implemented from aviation, the world of aviation, for Fruhoff trailers. And later, these radius rods and shackled springs were used in their torsion bar suspension, which was really famous for giving an incredibly smooth ride. And I've learned if you can crawl underneath trailers, as I've been doing, trying to identify them, you can find these hanging down, because sometimes they've removed the nameplate. So I've learned some of the clues to identify them. The I-beam axle is really a real Fruhoff hallmark. They used the construction really from skyscrapers, in the skyscrapers that were being built in New York and Chicago and so on. And they, not only was it strong, really strong, but it was also lightweight because they removed this portion of the steel, member. So they were super smart in bringing in new materials and using titanium in the 50s and 60s, and plastics, and stainless steel.
I do have a question. You mentioned the anti-lock brakes. Do you know roughly what year that was?
They started working on anti-lock brakes in the 50s.
Okay.
And the engineer who was in charge of it is still alive in Detroit,
Okay.
a really nice guy named Dave Barnowski. And it was a long story because they had to adapt the technology from the aviation. And at first they thought it was really a great invention, that it would improve safety, which was, a constant agenda to improve safety, not only for the drivers, but for everyone on the road. But anti-lock brakes had a whole series of difficulties, particularly on ice, and they would lock. So there was a lot of very, very serious accidents as a result of problems on ice.
So, but it's interesting because I'm not that well versed on heavy duty trucking and such, but I'm thinking that anti-lock brakes came around like in the 80s with the automobile.
Right.
But 30 years prior they were working on with the trucks. So
That's exactly
why I
right.
asked.
A lot of the things that Fruhoff implemented in civilian use, they used in military.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that Fruhoff was a huge military contractor, and so many things they had created, like the shipping container, for example, was something that they created during the Korean War that eventually they adapted for commercial use. And also the same with anti-lock brakes, hydraulics from the First World War, which they
Okay.
then used in dump trailers, after World War I. So they were, very progressive, and they would try these things. Maybe the military was their guinea pig.
Well, I know during World War II, you hear a lot of things that are kind of commonplace now were developed, just to defend our country and go against the enemy and stuff. You hear of like radar and such, that kind of stuff. And something like anti-lock brakes and some of the other things you mentioned, we don't think about them, but the war military action kind of speeds the development up. So,
That's true. Fruhoff was involved with Chrysler. Chrysler instituted radar units on top of Fruhoff trailers for World War II.
wow. Okay.
Under K.T. Keller, who was
Okay.
president of Chrysler.
Right. Yes. Okay.
So that, and with auto car tractors.
Okay.
Yeah, they're really neat.
So there's the Pennsylvania connection because of auto car. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
right.
they're a few miles from here.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
were, so
Cool pictures. I have cool pictures of them. I'll send them to you.
okay, good.
Now, they invented the trailer. Now, what year was that?
1914.
And then did they become the Fruhoff Trailer
The,
Company about the same time, or?
the Fruhoff Trailer Company was incorporated in 1918, and when they did an inventory of the business, Kendra, they didn't list a single horseshoe. Isn't that cool? And my grandmother, who was widely known for painting all the trailers, she was an active member of the company. I loved that about her. While she was raising 5 children, she was very active. So my grandfather, my grandmother, my uncle Harvey, and then Otto Newman, who was basically my grandfather's business partner.
Okay.
And he played an integral part of the story.
And how big did this company get? I mean, I know it's big.
The company became gigantic over the course of the years. In my father's era, they expanded into Europe under the Marshall Plan. They opened up a branch in France. They also opened up a branch in Brazil. So my father was the youngest child, so I feel like he had license to be a little bit more of a risk taker than his older brothers, who were, children of the Depression and so on. And he was really a visionary, and they expanded it. And my father died in '65, but Fruhoff lasted almost another 30 years. And in 1997, when it went bankrupt, it was considered globally the 75th largest company in the world.
Wow.
And they had plants around the country, around the world, really. And there were 18 plants in the United States, and gosh, over 100 sales and service branches. Just in really every metropolitan town, there was a sales office or a service office. So if you were a customer, and you had a breakdown or a problem, they could, help you with repairs. It
I know there was a plant outside of Harrisburg.
That's right.
You could see it right on the turnpike, and there's a rest stop right next to it.
That's exactly
and,
right.
A couple weeks ago, I was out there. I pulled into that rest stop just to take a look at the former Fruhoff plant, knowing you were going to be on the show. I don't know if that made any difference.
Is it still occupied?
It's for sale.
Oh.
I'm sure a plant that size, they probably are leasing out parts of it. I don't know. So.
Some of the old plants are still in operation. Wabash bought the company in '97, and
Okay.
I've been told that they bought the company really because they wanted their distribution channels. And all of the overseas companies were given an opportunity to buy themselves out, and they mostly did so. So Fruhoff trailers are still being produced around the world. I love Nippon Fruhoff in Japan. They have a website with all my photos of my grandfather with Japanese writing.
Wow.
It's sort of neat.
But they're still using the Fruhoff name.
They are, and the
Okay.
Fruhoff patents.
Okay.
So the products are still really great quality and great materials. They really believe in keeping those high standards.
So now you said something about World War II, them being involved with different products, and you mentioned some of the innovations they came up with. What were some of the things they made for the war material? Was it just trailers, or did they expand to other things also?
Sure. In World War II, they created a 60-ton armored vehicle called the Dragon Wagon. And you can imagine a vehicle that was 60 tons. You can imagine, how many miles per gallon it got. But this vehicle was designed to go out into the front lines and recover disabled tanks. And so you can imagine
It needs to be a heavy duty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They also created emergency command centers. So trailers were converted with electronics and radar, and so that generals or captains, whatever you name it, would have a place where they could have their
Right.
command center. They created small dolly trailers that were pole trailers for anti-aircraft missiles,
Okay.
for radar units, for searchlights. Trailers were adapted for munitions, for troops. Those trucks that you used to see in MASH, the TV program.
Yes.
With the canvas. They had trailers that were like that for carrying troops. So really, we traced all the patents. There were over 1,000 patents for civilian use and over 150 patents for military use.
Okay. And it's interesting because some of the trailers you just mentioned that were used for different purposes. I know Boyertown Body, they made trailers, pull-behind trailers, as well as, we'll say, boxes for the back of trucks that could be opened up and used for different things. Not command centers, but, for like small machine shops and, for the front line, they could do it. So it's kind of interesting how the whole country all kind of formed together for one purpose.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think they're bygone days.
Unfortunately.
Yes, I'd like not to think that, but I think that's the way it is. But
Detroit really mobilized, and all those guys who were in charge, K.T. Keller from Chrysler, and of course Henry Ford, they really mobilized, and it was a small fraternity in Detroit, of which my family was part of, but they all gathered together, and I'm sure that Autocar was a big part of that, and other
Right.
manufacturers that you mentioned were also involved.
so,
This is
I
another.
wanted to pull this photo out.
This is another military vehicle. It was a mobile post office.
okay.
And this was done in combination with Fagil. And later, which was owned by Peterbilt, it was Fagil Motor Truck. Or no, Motor Coach, I think it was called. But
Actual twin coach.
Twin Coach, that's it. Thank you. And I love the interior. It really was all those wooden little cubby holes for the guys to get their post boxes.
Okay.
Since she brings that up, we're going to take a quick break
Sure.
and go check out the truck that we started in,
Yes.
which is directly related to that.
Right.
But don't go away because we want to talk to you a little bit more
Thank
about
you.
your book and how we also want to know how you got into this too.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, Kendra.
So
Thank you.
We'll be
You're welcome.
right back with Ruth. Let's go check out that truck real quick.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, I feel like a truck driver here. I'm not really driving any truck. I'm just sort of sitting here in this truck. And I'm going to be talking about this make a truck, and it's called a Fagel. And they started this brand of truck back in 1916 out in California. And there's two brothers out there, Frank and William Fagel, started making automobiles. Actually, they started in Iowa, but then they moved to California, and they started building trucks there eventually, in Oakland actually. And Fagel was a pretty big name out there, I believe, and they got their foot in the manufacturing door because of World War I or the Great War. They started making some sort of vehicles for them, and I forget what. I thought I had it, but after the war, they started making orchard tractors. So there are 4 Fagel tractors out there. The problem being is they were too expensive and they didn't sell well. So because of that, they quit making the tractors and they decided to go into the truck business.
Okay.
Now, when they started building trucks, they were the 2.5 ton to 6 ton capacity version. And I'm not quite sure the year there. I'm thinking early 20s. And their expensive prices was $3,000 to $7,500 in that range. And it was interesting because they, as I said, they were made in Oakland. Now, you think of Oakland, what's the city near Oakland?
Anaheim?
How about San Francisco? Okay, San Francisco is known for hills, okay?
Oh, yes.
And so
Yep.
their trucks were designed for hills. And it's interesting because, you know, there was all these truck companies all over the place, but they kind of built to, you know, to sell them locally, at least to start with.
Right.
And that was their thing, to build them for the hills of San Francisco. Also, in the early 20s, they started building buses, and they were probably most well known for building their buses. It was interesting. You think of a bus today, will have doors on the curb side in the front. Some of their, I don't know if they still have them, but curb doors towards the back also. But these had a series of doors on both sides to make it easy entrance and exit. Anyway, that's back in the 20s. In 1924, they opened another factory in Kent, Ohio, which comes in handy a little later in their history. I mentioned 1924, you go over to the AACA Museum in Hershey, and they got one of these Fagel buses
I was going to
there.
say, I've seen a Fagel bus.
It's dark green.
Yep.
I think I've seen a couple of them now. But anyway, they have one over there. Somewhere along the lines, there's a company called American Car and Foundry Company out of Detroit, and they purchased the Fagel company. And at the same time, they bought a J.C. Brill company out of Philadelphia. And along with that, the Fagel brothers, they were still part of this whole conglomerate of AC&F, or American Car and Foundry Company. So the Fagel brothers, they got upset about some of the way their product was being manufactured, so they say, that's it, we're out of here. And so they left the company, and they started producing something called twin coach trucks. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of twin coach trucks, but one of their big products was a little delivery truck, like a bread truck or a milk truck, which sort of is involved similar to the trucks that were made here in Boyertown. And that was the twin coach trucks. And they also made larger trucks, but their claim to fame was these smaller ones. Some of the bigger trucks that they were continually making is a cab over. That came out in 1937. 1938, they had a tandem tractor that was built to haul 2 Fruhoff low bed trailers. So there's the Fruhoff that's coming back here. Total length is 74 feet. And back then, I guess, at least around here, 74 feet was probably illegal that long. 1938, they built an articulated truck, and it could pull a record of 104 tons. 1938, some of the Fagel assets were sold to Sterling Trucks out of Milwaukee. 1939, the whole company shut down. Fagel shut down. The rest of their assets were sold to somebody named T.A. Peterman. Now, if you've ever heard of Peterbilt trucks, okay, that was named from Peterman. And that's, so in 1939, they got rid of Fagel trucks and Peterbilt started again. Okay, that takes us to takes us during the war. And so they were closed during that time. And then in 1950, they decided to get back into business.
So they didn't do any wartime production then?
No, I kind of looked for that, and maybe, I mean, they sold all their assets to a different company, but I guess they were chomping at the bit. In 1950, they say, you know, we can get back in here and make some more money.
Was it the same brothers or?
Same brothers, Frank R. and William B.
Okay.
So in 1950, they get back into business and under the Twin Coach name, and they started a line of moving vans using the Fagel name. Now this truck I'm sitting in, if you want to use your imagination, can be a moving truck. You can see it's a van type truck here. It's quite heavy duty. They started building them in 1950. Now here's the connection with Fruhoff. The sheet metal on this was made by Fruhoff. Okay. Also, underneath, a lot of the stuff underneath, like the chassis and the springs and stuff, were all Fruhoff. And I believe that Ruth was underneath this truck before we started checking names out and everything. It was quite interesting. So anyway, Fruhoff sheet metal stampings were used for the body. And if you look at a Fruhoff truck or trailer from this era, and you look at the front of these up top, you can see very similar. And I'm assuming they use the same stamping. They probably cut a hole out for the windshields, for the door, and so on and so forth, and put running gear. Now you're going to see on TV some pictures of early Fruhoff trucks before this. This is 1954, but we're going to say 1950 looks even more like a trailer with just wheels stuck under it. In other words, there's not the sheet metal you see down between the wheels or in the front. And you're going to see a picture front of the truck facing you, and you look at the wheels and they're pointed straight ahead. Then you look at the wheels, they're turned. And the wheels on most vehicles, when they turn, they both turn like this, okay? Not on the early Fruhoffs, it was almost like a carriage thing, so they kind of swiveled the whole axle and everything. Along with that, the front bumper turned, and you'll see that in the picture where the wheels are turned, you see the bumper off to the side. I don't know how stable they were, but they got a better way of making it with this vehicle. Now, this vehicle, on a brief loan from the museum, has international running gear to it. There's even an international harvester IH on the front under the windshield. I look at the gauges, the horn button, they're all IH here. So I've seen pictures of some of these trucks. They had a cargo truck for livestock. And so it was, you figure sheet metal just like you see here, but in the back behind the driving compartment was all the slots you would see in a livestock truck. And it was all one continuous truck. They also made buses, and they were called convertible buses. So you could take the seats down and hold freight in the back and still have some seats. They made a bunch of them for the military, which could hold several people, plus a Jeep in the back. And I thought that was kind of interesting. That's about 1951 they were making it. 1953, Twin Coach sold their bus line to Flexible, which was a pretty well-known bus name back then. By 1954, the Fagel name was discontinued entirely. And So this is 1954. This is at the end of the line for the Faisal or the twin coach company. And so that's pretty much the history of this truck. And it's kind of interesting how this truck coincides with the Fruhoff company, you know, with the sheet metal and some of the framework underneath.
And speaking of Fruhoff, I guess we're going to go back in the diner
Yes.
and finish up our talk with Ruth, who was so gracious to come out here. So we'll
Okay.
see you back in the diner.
All right.
Okay, well, we just looked at a 50s era truck, and the 1950s were a really important era for Fruhoff, as I understand.
That's right, Kendra. My uncle was in charge of Fruhoff from 1930 after my grandfather died until 1949 when my father took over. And he was in charge of Fruhoff until about 63 when he stepped down. But in the 50s, not only did they have the benefit of the post-war building boom, and the interstate highway was created, my father contributed to that. He was sat on a committee, an advisory committee to Eisenhower during post-World War time. And, you know, Eisenhower was a big road guy. And that was one of his primary initiatives. Everyone knows about the Lincoln Highway convoy that Eisenhower participated on
Right.
when he was still a lieutenant.
Yeah.
What was it, 1919?
Something
that
like
happened
that.
after World War One.
A little before I was born.
Me too. And anyway, so when he finally became president, that was really one of his
Right.
first initiatives. And you can imagine men like my dad were, of course, a big help to him, just in terms of resources and information. And Fruhoff was not a road building company. I don't mean to imply that, but you know, there were still many, many resources that my dad could provide, you know, for the Interstate Highway System initiative.
You see, and I understand the interstate, you know, everything is standardized, you know, as far as overpasses and widths of the road and probably the tonnage that they can handle. And that would all come back to the trailers that are going to be running on it. You know, that would be pretty much the regular maximum load.
That's
And
actually
that's, you know, I'm sure why your grandfather, or your father was involved with that.
That's exactly right, Dan. It's interesting because the first semi-trailer that my granddad created was really an adapted wagon. And over the course of the decades, the wagon became enclosed for the first van. Then the van was heightened to accommodate for increased cubic volume, and then it was lengthened, and then they created tandems. And then, of course, they created many other versions of a trailer, a tanker trailer, a dump trailer, flatbed trailer. Refrigeration was a big thing for Fruhoff. They were the first to have a refrigerated trailer. That was started in the late 1900s, probably around 1920, 1919, 1920. And their early primitive use of refrigeration is fascinating. I've just had long conversations about refrigeration. Who knew how interesting it was? And also the tanker trailer was really a fascinating invention that they created. My father was in 1926 or 27, he was in the Des Moines plant, and Quaker Oats, who was of course a big customer, needed a enclosed trailer that could haul bulk foodstuffs. So bingo, they invented the tanker trailer. And of course, then that was adapted for use in the petroleum industry and chemicals. And I even saw a photograph of a double tanker trailer. So there would be two cylinders on the back of a chassis. And that was done for Eli Lilly to haul medical, bulk medical substances.
And you were saying something about the inside of those trailers.
Yes.
And you have to tell our viewers about
That's
that.
sort of neat. Later, as you know, with every product that Fruhoff made, they improved upon it, and their engineers, you know, implemented safety devices and so on. And tanker trailers were really dangerous if you were, let's say, you needed to stop at a stop sign or a traffic light. The liquid product would continue moving forward in what they called slosh. And if the driver wasn't a good driver, it would propel the entire trailer through the intersection. You can imagine how
Right.
dangerous that would be. So what they did was they put in these, what they call baffles. They're sort of like donut lozenge shapes inside the tanker trailer, which would prevent the forward momentum of the liquid material. However, they couldn't use it for dairy or milk industry.
And why would that be?
They'd end up with butter.
Yes. So how'd they get around something like that?
It was also difficult to clean those, so that was another reason
Yeah.
why it was not recommended for food products. But the baffles were not recommended for food products. But you had to get a good driver who knew what he was doing. See the importance of a good driver.
Yes, good driving, yeah. Okay.
Now, how did you get so involved in this project?
It's funny you should ask.
I know there's a family connection, but
Yes.
a little deeper than that.
My father died when I was just 8 years old, so I grew up with this sort of legacy of who he was and sort of this mythic figure. Of course, I remember him, and I think when you lose your parent at that age, you seize upon the memories that you do have. And of course, I love hearing stories about him from people who remember him. But I think when my mom died in 1997, I found 35 boxes of Fruhoff materials that were in my dad's office. And of course, he had this German secretary who kept everything, completely itemized and identified. So I was going through the files, and it became this sort of quest, I think, for me to discover who my father was as a businessman, as a father, as a man. And so in 2011, I lost my job with the economic adjustment, shall we say. And I had all this time on my hands while I was trying to find another job, and I thought, well, heck, let's see what happens. And I built the website, and that was just like unleashing a monster. I got contacted by former employees, former customers, enthusiasts, historians, people across the country. And of course, we were immediately motivated to then start work on book number 1. And in the midst of all of this,
Number 1.
the German Institute in Washington, D.C. contacted me, and they were doing a project on 100 influential German Americans who helped shape the United States, and they selected my granddad to be part of that project.
Oh.
And it was such a really big honor. And they asked me for a 10,000-word essay, and that was, a book was like this sort of Herculean challenge, right? But 10,000-word essay was, okay, I can do that. So my co-author and I worked on it, and we submitted the essay to the German Institute, and then we adapted that for book number 1. And it has 90 pages of photographs, mostly from our family collection, and 40 pages of text.
Okay.
It's really lucky that you have all this material. I mean, how much of this stuff gets lost
I know.
or thrown away? It's so nice that you have it.
I'm always nagging companies when I have the occasion to save their history. And I will have to say that when my mother died and the boxes were found in her attic, many people wanted to throw those things away. And I was sort of on the fence, but I loved my father so much, and I think I just couldn't bear to part with them. And I'm really glad I saved them. And it's been wonderful. Some of these old-fashioned brochures, this is the manufacturing story, which has these wonderful photographs of a lot of the old plants, Avon-on-Lake, Harrisburg, Ontario, Memphis, Cedar Rapids. It's so neat to see the different products that they were manufacturing all around the country. Flatbeds, aluminum dry cargo vans. It's been a wonderful experience. I will also have to say that another really neat product that Fruhoff made, they were the first to create a dump trailer in the late 1900s, the late 1919, and they brought hydraulics after World War I back to the United States and implemented that technology for lift gates and then for dump trailers. But in my father's era, he developed dump trailer that everyone refers to as the bathtub dump. And it's a really great trailer with, probably 11 axles, the dual tires, and it was able to carry 60 tons. It was a huge, just an incredible, I think I have a photograph of it here. And this, whenever I go anywhere, people refer to the bathtub dump as their favorite Fruhoff trailer. It's so funny.
And what era was this? What
This was
year again? The
right
bathtub?
in the early 60s.
Okay.
It was probably one of the last things that my father worked on was the bathtub dump. Here, it's a tiny photograph of it, but I'll have to send you one.
Okay. It's down here.
So that was, and there's many of them are still on the road. I mean,
How about that?
amazing. There's one guy that I met named Michael Gully from Gully Transport in Quincy, Illinois, and he takes all of his Fruhoff trailers, excuse me, and he sends them to Arkansas to have them refurbished. And he has his own sign made where he says, "This Fruhoff trailer has been manufactured, restored using recycled products." And he's just a total Fruhoff diehard. And there's many guys like this across the country. I just keep meeting them. They love their Fruhoff trailers.
So is there a Fruhoff club yet?
Yes, there is.
There already is. Okay.
Well,
are you the president or
No,
cheerleader?
I'm just a cheerleader.
Okay.
On Facebook, we have a group page that's open to anyone who's an enthusiast. We have close to 300 members, and it's only been
Great.
up for a month. And guys are posting photos and information from around the world. Really, we have some members in other countries. And just recently, one of the members posted some really great long Fruhoff trailers that were manufactured for trains. And they were used to carry coal, primarily by Detroit Edison. But I'll bet you dollars to donuts there's a connection with Pennsylvania on those. I'll have to
Coal.
research
Coal.
it. There you go.
Coal, gotta be. So we have to do that with Boyertown. Get it? Now, what did you say? The Fruhoff? You have
A Facebook page.
There you go. Oh, we already got one.
A group, but get a group page.
But yeah.
But it's interesting since I've been involved with the museum and Boyertown trucks, the connections you make, and I'm sure you're getting the same thing.
Yes.
And it's like, who cares about this stuff? Well, there's a lot of people who
Yeah.
care. Just because they're enthusiasts or they own one or whatever. And it's really interesting. I like that kind of stuff. So.
Dan, I think book number 4 could be the love-hate relationship between trucking and railroad.
Oh, okay.
Come on. I think this is a
Oh,
product.
you're
yeah.
thinking me.
I'll
Okay,
help.
yeah. You'll help.
But now you said something earlier about how you found you're telling us a story you found out about, but not before you published this book. You are planning to come out with further.
Yes, I
Yes.
have a tell-all, 16-chapter book, which primarily
Wow.
focuses on my father's era, and the proxy battle. And my father was indicted by the Kennedy administration because of his relationship with Dave Beck. And of course, the Kennedys had a real axe to grind with the Teamsters, and Dave Beck, of course, was the president of the Teamsters. And just because of my father's business association with Dave Beck, they indicted my dad. He had to testify before the McClellan hearings. He was fully exonerated, but it really took a big toll on him.
Sure.
And Beck ended up in prison. He was pardoned by Gerald Ford. But yeah, this is book number 2.
Dan looked at me because Gerald Ford is my favorite president.
Really? Oh.
So we're just like about out of time here.
Okay.
So you got this wonderful book here. If our viewers would want to purchase one, how would they go about getting it?
Well, they have them in the bookstore here at the museum.
Okay.
You should all support this wonderful museum.
But if somebody's, well, I guess you can buy it online or contact
Yeah,
us.
if you're not in the area, there's other ways.
It's for
to
sale on my
purchase.
website, which
Okay.
is singingwheels.com, where I
Okay.
have tons of Fruhoff history, and also on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't get to talk about Fruhoff's invention and patent of the shipping container, which is
right.
widely attributed to Malcolm McLean. Malcolm McLean was a Fruhoff customer, and complained to my father about people pilfering liquor from his trailers. And Fruhoff created the shipping container and then financed Sealand. And more information is on my website.
And there are so many great photos in here. It's
Thank
just
you.
packed with photos and advertisements, and it's a really neat book. Very well done. So yes, it is for sale in our gift shop. But again, if you don't live around here or if we run out, you can go to singingwheels.com
That's right.
and order a copy or 2 or 3 there. So
Thank you, Kendra. What a wonderful experience.
thank you
And Dan,
so
I really
much for
appreciate
coming.
it.
Thank you.
thank
It's
you
been
so
really
much
great.
for being here. And you are officially our geographically furthest away guest on the show
Right.
because she literally came from the other side of the country to be
Yes.
here.
That's great.
This isn't the only reason you're here out in Pennsylvania, but Dan and I will think that it is. That you
Yes,
just came to
we'll
see
make
us.
believe, yeah. And the other reason you're out here for, well, that was secondary.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
exactly
since
right.
I'm on the
Really,
TV
to
show,
came
I
to
might
see
as
you.
well, yes. So, okay, well, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, that's our show. I think it was a great show.
I think so too.
Great guest. A
Yes,
great guest
absolutely.
truck. And it's just a neat, whole history of how we move stuff.
Stuff.
And how much it's changed our lives when you get beyond the railroad and can transport this stuff over roads and just all of it was really neat. So again, if you are interested, Ruth Fruhoff's book, Singing Wheels, is for sale here at the museum. But if you don't live around here or you get here, and we've already sold them all, you can go to her website, singingwheels.com, and learn more and buy the book and learn more about her upcoming projects too. And we hope to see you all on June 20th at our food truck fair. Do pick up a copy of the Boyertown Bulletin, which is here in the lobby. And it's free. It's a great resource. It has a great article on the food truck fair if you want more information on it. So do pick it up. And other than that, I think
Let's go home.
let's go eat some pie.
Yes, that's even better.
See you next month.
Okay, see ya.